Hello everybody, and welcome to Movies by McManus, the channel where we break down movies, comics, TV, books, whatever kind of media you're into, in the context of who created it and what effect it's trying to have on the world. And today we're going to be breaking down the 2021 TV miniseries Dr. Death. Dr. Death premiered on NBC's streaming service Peacock, along with its documentary counterpart, Dr. Death, The Undoctored Story, and is based off the Wonderly podcast of the same name. This is also going to be the first Movies by McManus, where we'll be breaking down a TV show that I myself personally worked on. But I can't really give any behind-the-scenes details about the show, so we're going to have to stick to the story as aired. Dr. Death follows the story of Dr. Christopher Duntsch, who, over the course of 2 years as a neurosurgeon, maimed 33 people and killed 2. Though, unfortunately, earlier this year, 2 of his other victims died from their injuries, bringing his total number of murders up to 4. Dr. Death tells the story of Christopher Duntsch through the eyes of doctors Randall Kirby and Robert Henderson, the 2 surgeons who fought to have Duntsch's medical license revoked and charges brought against him. And what Dr. Death captures is not just the profile of a sociopath, but a highlight of the problems in the American healthcare system in general, which would allow a sociopath like Christopher Duntsch to continue for so long. So let's look at Dr. Duntsch and the world that created him. One of the great things about Dr. Death is that while it shows why Christopher Duntsch is the way he is, at no point does the show depict him as being sympathetic. Even near the end of the show, when Christopher Duntsch has lost everything, you're never meant to feel bad for him. Everything that has happened to him, he definitely deserved. Nor does it celebrate Christopher Duntsch's downfall. It more so presents it as the boring wheels of justice finally clenching down on him. His comeuppance doesn't come all at once, but is a long, drawn-out process. The show makes it clear that Christopher Duntsch's final downfall isn't a joyous occasion or something to celebrate. It's a long time coming moment of justice for a series of crimes that should have never been allowed to happen to begin with. We see from the beginning that Christopher Duntsch thinks very highly of himself. He believes to be above everybody else, and thinks he could outperform anybody as long as he fully commits himself. Before his career as a doctor, we see Duntsch's dreams of becoming a star college football player are crushed, when despite all the effort he put in, he simply cannot compete with the other players who are physically much larger than he is. But right after this, Duntsch finds his calling in medicine, and during his training, becomes close with specific doctors who he knows will feed into his narcissism. We see this firsthand in Kelsey Grammer's character of Dr. Jeffrey Skadden. Early in his training, Christopher Duntsch became close with Dr. Skadden. And in both the show and real life, Dr. Skadden let Christopher Duntsch skip the required number of hours in training in order to become a certified neurosurgeon. One of the main points made in the series was that Christopher Duntsch was not an adequately trained surgeon, and some of the other doctors were surprised he was able to be certified with so few training hours. It goes to show how abusive people are just as good at grooming allies as they are at grooming victims. Not only do we see Christopher Duntsch charm his victims into letting him perform surgery on them, but also charm other doctors and heads of medical boards in order to allow him to keep performing as a surgeon. Christopher is constantly surrounding himself with people who will feed into his ego, and who, despite all of his failings, will still see him as being above them. And no character shows this more perfectly than Jerry Summers. Jerry Summers, at least the show version of Jerry, is someone who doesn't think very highly of himself. He attaches himself to Duntsch, who, as someone with high self-esteem, is the type of person that Jerry can look up to. And in return, Duntsch sees Jerry as a person who he could easily manipulate. Throughout the series, Jerry is constantly seeking the approval of Christopher, to the point that he allows Duntsch to operate on him just to prove that he is in fact a good surgeon. A decision which would leave Jerry paralyzed from the neck down after Duntsch botches the surgery. Unfortunately, the real Jerry Summers was paralyzed for the rest of his life and died in February of this year, which is why it's important to remember that this is a true story and these are real victims. And that is also why this story can't just be the profile of a sociopath, but needs to show the problems within our medical industry, which would lead to someone like Christopher Duntsch existing. The story of Christopher Duntsch is actually mostly told in flashback, while the main story of Dr. Death follows Dr. Randall Kirby and Dr. Robert Henderson, the two surgeons who fought the Texas Medical Board to try to get Dr. Duntsch's medical license revoked. One of the problems that Dr. Death addresses is how hard it is to actually fire a doctor, and why hospitals are so unwilling to fire or even suspend even the worst of doctors. Unsurprisingly, the motive comes down to money. Now, if you've been following this channel for a while now, I might be sounding like a broken record at this point. But the fact of the matter is, this is a story that could only happen in America. We're the only industrialized country in the world where healthcare is treated as a business rather than a right that every citizen is entitled to. Because of this, hospitals often prioritize profit over the health and safety of their patients. And a neurosurgeon, any neurosurgeon, despite their talent level, is a major moneymaker for said hospital. While Dr. Death focuses primarily on Christopher Duntsch's time at Baylor Plano and Dallas Medical Center, the two most prestigious hospitals that Christopher Duntsch worked at, the fact of the matter is only half of his victims came from these two hospitals, and Dallas Medical Center he worked at for less than a week. For the rest of his career, Christopher Duntsch's victims came from Southampton Medical Center, a hospital that was on the verge of bankruptcy and needed a new way to bring in income. Something that is touched on more so in the documentary than in the TV show is that medical malpractice lawsuits in Texas have a cap of $250,000. Meaning that even if every single one of Christopher Duntsch's patients sued the hospital, they would still make a profit of around $65,000 per surgery. In contrast, if a surgeon is fired from a hospital and there isn't a good enough reason, the hospital can be sued for lost wages, which there is no cap on, and could cost the hospital millions of dollars. So in the end, Southampton Medical Center kept Duntsch around for as long as they could. And it wasn't until his final victim, Jeff Glidewell, who Duntsch almost decapitated, that the Texas Medical Board finally decided to revoke his license. And even while charges were brought against him in Texas, Duntsch then tried to apply for a medical license in Colorado, but was denied. Eventually, after a 13-day trial, Duntsch was sentenced to life in prison and won't be eligible for parole until 2045, and currently all 4 hospitals which Duntsch worked at have ongoing civil suits against them. So, as I said in the beginning, this show is based off of the Dr. Death podcast on Wonderly. And with the podcast, only the first season follows Christopher Duntsch. The rest are about other doctors who also terrorized their patients, showing that this problem isn't just contained to one doctor, but a problem with the medical industry in general, which prioritizes profit over the safety of their patients. So, if any of these themes interest you, check out Dr. Death on Peacock. And if you happen to do so, look for my name in the credits. If you have anything you'd like to add about Christopher Duntsch, about the show, feel free to leave a comment below. And if you like this video, subscribe to our channel, check out our podcast, and follow us on social media at Movies by McManus. I'm your host, Greg, and have a good night.